Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here, and today I would like to discuss advertisements in video games. So this is kind of a bygone era, I would say for the better personally, but it also never really bothered me. If anything, it was actually kind of funny that it was even just in existence to begin with. But for those of you who might be a little bit younger, and on the rare occasion that it does occur, you may have missed it. There used to be like real world advertisements in video games. And just like on TV shows and movies, it was the same thing. It was like, hey, this will help us basically make this video game. We can get extra money because this real world company wants to advertise in our game. And I remember in Crackdown, that was the first time I remember ever seeing that was Crackdown, because it was an open world game. And so there would be billboards and you run around and it's like, what the F is this? 5GUM. And so, that's back when 5GUM still had those commercials. But heck, that might have been before they had those funny commercials, but they had 5GUM ads in Crackdown. And I remember seeing it, and it really sticks out. That's the funny thing, because, you're going through a video game, and then a actual real-world picture pops up, and it's like, okay, that stands out a little bit. So it was always interesting back in the day when that sort of thing would happen. And Crackdown, like I said, was definitely one of those games where, and they even did it where, with the technology advancements of the internet, they could even swap the ads out, because I remember one time I was playing it and I think I may have been offline, or it was like it was years, it was a while after the game had come out, but there were still ads there, and there were different ads, and it was like, oh, that's interesting. Like things, the ads can change. I want to say it was Verizon, but I don't remember if that's what it was. It may have been Verizon, and my reasoning for being like, I kind of think I'm right on that, is because Verizon went all in with Alan Wake. And they took this out, so you have to like look it up, because I'm pretty sure they took it out of the remaster. But in the original Alan Wake, they had, not only did they have a straight up Verizon commercial, they literally had an achievement in the game for watching the Verizon commercial. And I still remember exactly what level it was at too, because it was during the level where you're at, basically it's like a mental institution, like a secret mental institution. And when everything goes crazy, you're running along trying to make this grand escape, and then they have TVs throughout the game, and typically you end up watching the TV, and it would actually be their version of the Twilight Zone. It was called Night Springs, and you could like watch this little episode of like just a weird sci-fi thriller type of show. And this one time, look up at the TV and it was like, oh, this is a Verizon ad, and it was like a full-on Verizon commercial. And then you watch the commercial, boop, achievement. And it was crazy. And they also had what was it, Energizer? Yeah, Energizer batteries. So for the flashlights, when you have to refill them, you would pick up the batteries and they would straight up say Energizer on it. Like, it would be the full package. It wouldn't just be like, oh, you found like 2 Energizer batteries. You would find a 4-pack of batteries, and it would have the Energizer logo and everything on it. And once again, you can look this stuff up, because I'm pretty sure they took all of that out of the remaster. But that was definitely an interesting thing back in the day, and that was way more integrated than what it was with Crackdown, because Crackdown was just like, it was just like normal. It was literally billboards in the video game, like you would buy actual ad space. And I think there was a couple, I'm sure there were a few other games that did the same thing. Oddly enough, GTA not being among them, not that I can recall at least, but definitely an interesting era where, games just did certain things. It was, back during the time where video games had commercials as well, and not just, hey, here's the release date trailer or the announcement trailer, or the 10-minute Death Stranding 2 trailer. It would be like, hey, the Nathan Drake commercial for Uncharted 3, and they did like a tie-in with Subway, and just crazy stuff like that. It was like, man, it's definitely a bygone era on both sides of things, where it comes to advertisements within the video games and just advertisements utilizing the games in general, because we don't really have that nearly as much as we used to. I'm sure there's some bits and pieces, they kind of pop up every once in a while. I think it's kind of a rare occurrence these days where something might have like a video game tie-in or something like that. And even if it does, let's be honest, it's going to be Call of Duty. It's going to be Call of Duty, and there's going to be something, and it's like, Monster Energy drink, or Red Bull used to be like the big thing. It still kind of is. It's like the big energy drink. But I still remember getting, and this was one of the worst loot crates I ever got. But I remember they did a loot crate, and they literally put a bottle of like a little can of Red Bull in there because Ninja was on it, and it was like, this ties to gamers because they have, it's Ninja's face. Like, I don't give an F about Ninja. No offense, he's a Detroit native, but I don't give an F about Ninja, and I don't even like Red Bull. I was pissed when I got that, and it was like, but video game advertisements, Red Bull gives you wings, Red Bull is like all over the place. I think that's still something, because even at the Game Awards, I think they still have the Red Bull commercials that are specifically tied to gaming. So once again, those rare occurrences, they do still happen, but it's not like it used to be where, you know, you have video game characters actually being made in engine doing crazy stuff. You know, Nate's jumping through a window, which that sequence is in the game, but obviously they change stuff around, and then he pops up like, boom, got my, you know, my $5, the $5 foot long, time long since passed. But he's like, boom, I got my sub, and he had a pop and everything, and it was like, dang, this is pretty sweet. You know, for me it was cool because it was just like, wow, you know, video games, like a video game Subway commercial, and I loved Uncharted, so for me it was extra special. Like, this is so weird and crazy, but it was always fun. It was always just an interesting little thing, and I definitely always enjoyed that back in the day. And then of course you have the GameStop commercials, which were definitely fun in their own right. You know, they did a lot of silly stuff where, you know, companies they would do like a lot of machinima type stuff where they would just dub over random moments in the game and just make stuff up, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm doing this. Like, those were funny. It was like, you know, like little things like that I remember enjoying back in the day. And then eventually it got more and more towards just, you know, classic commercial type of stuff, and, you know, pre-order now and get the DLC, which, here's a crazy story. Spoilers for Batman Arkham Knight, which at this point should be fine, but just in case, spoilers for Batman Arkham Knight. When that game came out, they had the DLC for the Red Hood, and if you pre-ordered the game at GameStop, that was like their whole commercial. It was like, you know, Batman Arkham Knight, blah blah blah. Hey, pre-order now and you get the Red Hood DLC. Because of that commercial, I always assumed that Red Hood was going to be in the game as a separate character from the Arkham Knight. So when I played through the game, I was actually surprised by that twist, that everyone was like, you saw the twist coming from a mile away. And I would have, had it not been for that GameStop ad, because when they did that, it was technically a spoiler, which I guess it was a spoiler either way, that it was, you know, it was DLC, so it was less of a spoiler because it was post-game content, but I didn't know that. So when they said that, it was like, oh, I thought it was like the Nightwing thing, which even then that was post-game stuff too. But I was like, oh, so Red Hood's in the game, so this isn't gonna be Jason Todd, it's a different character. That's really interesting. I can't wait to see how that plays out. And so the whole effing game, I was waiting for Red Hood to show up, because I'm like, well, he's gonna show up because they wouldn't have spoiled that in the DLC, right? Like, for the GameStop commercial. Turns out they did, and it was like, that actually saved me from knowing the ending of the game, because I was like, oh, well, I know Red Hood shows up. I just assumed he was gonna show up at the end of the game. Because they do a thing in there, the part where they finally go through like the Jason Todd thing, where it's like, here's what happened to Jason Todd, and I was like, oh, so they're adding in the Red Hood at like the final act of the game. Because I think when they do that, the Jason Todd stuff where they reveal him dying from the Joker, I think there was still like 3 or 4 hours of that game left, and I'm like, you can do that. You can introduce a character in the last 3 or 4 hours, especially for comic book people. A lot of people that played already knew, like, that's kind of was one of the big gripes about the game, is that so many people were like, yeah, I already knew who that was. So shout out to GameStop for, in a weird way, saving me from already knowing the answer to who the Arkham Knight was, because I was like, oh, well, if Red Hood's in it, then the Arkham Knight must be a separate character. I had no idea it was separate DLC. I just assumed they were totally separate characters. So there's a random story from those old commercials where they tell you what the DLC is going to be, and then I was just like, oh, it kind of spoils that Red Hood's in the game, but it actually saved me from just kind of being like, oh, well, this was a very obvious twist. So I was actually shocked. I'm one of the few people that, I'm probably like the only person that knew the comic story of Red Hood and still got surprised by that game, because GameStop in a way spoiled that Red Hood was the DLC, and that just made me assume Red Hood was in the game to begin with. So shout out to GameStop. You actually saved me and allowed me to enjoy the twist wasn't good, but you allowed me to have a twist. Like, you know, if we're being like objective about it, it was like, yeah, they, even with the way they did it, I think they could have done it better, because they did the Jason Todd thing like at the last minute. Then it's like, oh, okay, so even if you didn't read the comics, I feel like a lot of people could have figured that out. I'm sure some people were still surprised, but even the way that they did it in like the last third of the game was kind of like, oh, well, you know, Chekhov's dead kid, you know. So, you know, it is what it is. But interesting times. All the GameStop ads, I definitely enjoyed those back in the day. Like I said, the sort of machinima style, I thought were pretty funny. And then them just doing the usual thing where hype up the games and stuff like that. And then, like I said, the era, well, we're still doing it, but the era of Red Bull being tied to video games is still a thing. Not nearly as much as when it came out, but also Monster Energy came in, and then that kind of took over. In the olden times, before even Red Bull, it was like Mountain Dew was the thing, and then after Mountain Dew, it was Red Bull, and then after Red Bull, maybe for like that half a second before like everybody was dropping dead, it was Four Loko, and then after Four Loko, Monster came out, and then it was like, okay, now now they're all kind of there, and I still feel like Monster's the number one because it's really tied to Call of Duty. Like Red Bull is still there, but just not nearly as much as it used to be, and I feel like Monster kind of took over, and Monster is Call of Duty. Like Call of Duty is what I think of when I think of Monster, as far as it tying into video games and stuff like that. But I would love to know what you guys think about that era. If you actually lived it, what are your thoughts on that era of advertisements in video games and how they used to handle that stuff? Advertisements in general about video games. Like we're past an era now where little stuff like the Subway thing, not only will it not happen because I think we just kind of move past those sorts of tie-ins, but the industry is larger. I think that's a big part of why we don't need to see that. It's just like, I think it was my very last episode, movie-based tie-ins and video games and stuff like that, where it's like, hey, you don't really need the movie-based video game anymore. Like it's okay. And plus it takes a long time. Like I mean, even when they were doing that, it was a bad idea anyway because they were rushing everybody. But now it's like games cost even more money, games take even more time. They aren't doing Subway commercials and like doing, in-engine 4K graphics, and it's like, they would never do anything with The Last of Us, but that would be hilarious somehow if they had a Last of Us commercial, Last of Us Part 2 commercial, but it was the video game characters doing something like nice. That would be so weird. But for Uncharted 3, it was like, okay, it works. It's a silly thing, and they got Nolan North to do the voice and everything. It's like, this is crazy. That's the one I think of the most because it was such a huge franchise. Like everything else, I don't think ever really had a commercial where it was like that. I'm sure there's something that I can't think of, but I think the Uncharted commercial is like the epitome of video game commercials that just do like random crazy tie-ins, where it's like, hey, Subway and Uncharted 3. I can't remember anyone else doing anything like that where they actually use like a sequence in the game and they use the actual rig of the character and they had the voice actor come in and actually go like, Subway, eat fresh. Like, that's crazy. Like that stuff we got to make sure it lives on forever. Like, hey, Naughty Dog, remember when you guys did this? That's hilarious. So, just little stuff like that, I'm gonna miss it because it was so crazy to see, just like weird stuff like that. But I will also miss video game commercials that used to be like kind of all out. Like, perfect example, honestly, the old Halo commercials, those were pretty cool. Even when I was not playing Halo, those live action commercials were intense. It was like, this is nuts. Like, this is super cool to watch. And now, not that, trailers are bad or anything like that, but they're not on the same level. Even though we spend more money, the games make more money. Although, with the way the industry is, they don't make enough money because it's not $18 billion per game. And the big wigs are just like, and they kill everybody off. All the companies just die off. But that's not what this is about. It's just about cool commercials. We don't get those as much. Commercials, the trailers will still be cool. They'll have the music and it'll still be, epic moments from the game, or just, give you that feeling of what's being done. Or if it is an announcement trailer, it'll just be something to give you kind of the essence of what the game's going to end up being. But I don't know if we're really going to be in that era anymore, or we're going to go back to that for a multitude of reasons. I think it goes even beyond just, games cost more. It takes more time to do that stuff. If you want to like make a custom commercial, it takes the extra money to do like a live action thing. I think it's just the fact that we're in an era where, even though, sure, you can do a buttload of ads on YouTube, it's just not the same thing anymore. It's not the same as being on TV. And I'm sure, and I'll be completely honest, I could not possibly tell you because I don't watch, regular TV anymore. Like, if I'm on TV, it's streaming. I have not turned on like a regular 2, 4, or 7, to watch TV like in who knows how many years. I don't watch regular TV anymore. I only watch, I go right to the YouTube, video I want to watch, or I go directly to the movie or TV show I want to watch. And the ads that pop up there are the same effing things over and over again, because it's just advertisements about drugs or some sort of medication you need, or it's lotion or something like that. This is a crazy one. We're at the point where, because I was watching something, I think I was watching Invincible. I was finally finishing up the season, and then the ads pop up, and the ad was like, just press OK and we'll add this to your cart. And it was like a lotion commercial, and it was like, you can just press OK and we'll add this to your cart. And I was like, holy crap, we're at that point where you can just buy stuff from the commercial, because you're on Amazon and it's like, oh, we sell this product, just hit a button and you can add it to your cart right now as you're watching the ad. That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy to me. Technology, it is funny. But man, we're in a different era. It's just different. Like, I don't see video game trailers, on Amazon. Mostly you'll see them on YouTube. I don't think you'll really see them on, Netflix or anything like that. I think they probably stick straight to YouTube. Although Netflix, for like half a second there, they did have their gaming thing, which they shut that down because Netflix does a lot of stupid stuff where they throw like $8 billion in the thing. They have so much money, it blows my mind. Except they don't have any money. Crazy. But advertisements, video games, the combination of the two, it's a bygone era. At this point, you get your announcement trailer, reveal trailer, announcement date trailer, and like gameplay trailer. And then I guess they still count them as TV spots. You get like your quick 30-second to 1-minute commercials as well, and those are still out there too. But it's totally different era, and it's very interesting to see especially if you go back, obviously for people that are younger, within the last, I don't really remember when it stopped, but it's definitely been like within like the last 10 years, I'd say. I think, if we're going like Uncharted 3, I think that was like the peak, and then after that it started to kind of wane, and I don't think we ever had it to that extent ever again. I think that was, like I said, I think that was the number one. GameStop commercials are very in a different era where it's like, hey, they're advertising this new game coming out, so they make something silly from it. So that's definitely different. But obviously GameStop, unless I'm mistaken, they definitely don't have commercials anymore. And as far as video games are concerned, it's like, hey, here's a reveal trailer, here's the possibly the release date trailer, and then here's like the release date, or like I forgot what they call it. Everyone calls them the same, but it's like the actual like release trailer when the game comes out, and then that's about it. And then if you're Kojima, you just bust out like a full-on 10-minute trailer, which his games are like 80 years long, so he can do 10 minutes and you didn't even scratch the surface. But it's an interesting time. Things are very succinct and straightforward when it comes to commercials. And the trailers, like I said, it's not like the trailers and video game advertisements have gotten worse or anything like that. It's just that we're in a different era for like that silly fun factor, I'd say. Because something else that I thought of, and this was because I was recently watching like an old Assassin's Creed thing, like a retrospective, and it was on Assassin's Creed 3, and they showed a clip from the old video game awards where they used to do like the best character from a video game, and companies would actually make videos for those characters to like either accept or if they won, they would accept the award or whatever. But even for the announcement, characters would be like, hey, like we're honored to be considered like one of the best characters in gaming for this year and stuff like that. And companies would design that stuff. I'll never forget, this was when BioShock Infinite came out. They had the Lutesses as like the video game characters of the year, and I love that. They were like all throughout the game. It was either it was the Game Awards, whichever one it was the Game Awards. I don't remember if it was still on Spike, but I think it was back then. And I remember that year specifically because they showed up a lot throughout that event. Like they would just pop in and out, and I always loved the dialogue. Like they're probably my favorite thing about BioShock Infinite was the way that they spoke. I thought they had like immaculate dialogue for those two characters. So I always loved them every time they popped up in the weird way that they spoke. So I love those characters, but I always remember they were like just thrown in throughout the video game awards. They would just pop up and they would just have the Lutesses, and they got the voice actors to come in, and they modeled them because it wasn't stuff from within the game. They were saying like unique dialogue for the video game awards. And so like their hand movements and their gestures would be tied to what they were saying for the awards. And it was like, this is super cool. Like we don't have that sort of stuff anymore. Like things have gotten, for lack of a better term, things have gotten more serious. and I kind of miss some of those funnier things. I know that's not in the same vein as, advertising, but it kind of ties in to that realm of like, we don't have some of these sillier moments that we used to have back in the day, where it's like you could spend that extra time and it'd be like, yeah, let's just have a little fun. Like, every once in a while people might have fun within the game itself, but it's definitely a bygone era. Definitely an interesting change in how things have been, and who knows, where we're going. Video game advertisements are probably going to be where they are now. They're just good trailers and then that's it. But I'll definitely miss some of those sillier moments that we had, for sure. Like, it was always interesting seeing characters do unique stuff like that, whereas they just make up something that happens. Like, oh, thanks for this, nomination for this award. Thank you for the award, if the character wins or whatever. And it was like, this is just cool. Like, I'm sure, there are tons of companies that did that during the video game years, when they would do that for the characters, which they should totally bring that back, actually. That was always a cool thing. Like, who's like the coolest new character? That was actually a pretty decent award, because it does flow into, the writing and directing of the game. Like, I'm sure Jin Sakai would have definitely been on that list when Ghost of Tsushima came out. He definitely would have won. But I think they should bring that back. I haven't thought of that in a long time, but they should definitely bring that back. Always thought that was a cool award, like, the new video game character of the year type of thing. Like, who's everybody talking about? And it was fun, just fun little thing. But those are my thoughts on just the bygone era of video game advertisements, whether they're in video games or just the way that games would tie in with stuff. Like I said, Call of Duty and Monster, I think that's, a match made in trashy heaven forever. But other than that, we don't really get much. It's not the same as it used to be. Red Bull will have its little thing during the Game Awards, and that's about it, because their regular commercials aren't going to be, specifically tied to gamers. It's going to be the regular Red Bull commercials, but they still make those specific ones for us nerds when the awards are popping up. But I would love to know your thoughts, especially if you're as old as me, old as dirt. I would love to know your thoughts on like the commercials that you think of when you think of just like old video game commercials, the silly things that might have happened, GameStop commercials, weird tie-in commercials with video game characters. I would love to know, because there's so many out there. And if you're young, I highly recommend looking it up. It's definitely a really good part of gaming history, where it was just like, it was a different era and things were just silly and fun. And I think that was kind of during the era where, they would have like just random competition TV shows. Like, you could go on like Spike TV, and I'll never forget watching like the Uncharted thing. And I think it was for Uncharted 3. And they had like a competition where people were like, the biggest Uncharted fans or whatever. And so they were doing like weird little contests, like just little stuff like that. We don't have that anymore. And that's different from, the advertising thing, but it once again just fits all in, and just the era we were in during that time of just doing whatever when it came to video games. And I kind of miss it. I'm going to miss it, because it was a sillier time. It was some sillier stuff that we used to do back then. So we'd love to know your thoughts on that. If you're younger, definitely look up just old video game commercials, and I think you'll have a good time. But for everyone that remembers going through that, I would love to know your thoughts. What do you guys think about it? Which ones do you guys miss? Whether, even if it's just a GameStop commercial, it doesn't have to be the all-in Subway tie-in style. But I would love to know what advertisements have just always stuck out in your mind, what random gaming moments where you're playing a game and you're like, why the F am I looking at this advertisement for like Maybelline? I don't think that they ever did that, but that would be hilarious. You're just swinging around in Spider-Man and it's like, maybe she's born with it. Maybe it's Maybelline. But that's it for me. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.